I'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Mike Hartree, and I'm a systems engineer with Cisco Systems, and I've been with Cisco for the last 25 years. And I wanted to bring our own perspective to what's going on with the explosive adoption of LoRaWAN around the world, and maybe put in the context of other networking trends that we see. So without any delay, so as a systems engineer for Cisco Systems, one of the problems that I have is our customers are not only adopting LoRa, they are adopting all kinds of different spectrums for many different use cases, and it can be pretty confusing for a very large enterprise to try and choose between the different technology and the different spectrum that's out there and match that up with the use case. So as an engineer talking to large enterprises and governments around the world, we try and walk our different customers through the various use cases and to identify what kind of distance is required for their use case, what kind of devices they might need, or what other issues they might have, like backwards compatibility might be a problem for them. So in trying to identify what technology, we really need to first get our hands around the various use cases. So we made this little slide here to kind of lay out how the differences between most of the spectrum we see being used, and this doesn't even cover everything. So we mostly see large enterprises adopting Wi-Fi 6, for instance. Certainly 4G LTE is out there in force. Now 5G is coming onto the scene, but that's not even everything. There's CBRS out there, and then Cisco has some of our own products called like Curb, for instance, that does very high bandwidth over 2, 3, 4 miles, 500 meg over 2, 3, 4 miles. So you could imagine if you're an enterprise trying to invest in this technology, it might be fairly difficult to decide what you should be investing in. So here's just a list of some of the features of the various technology, of the various spectrum that's out there, and that's not even half the problem. So at the same time, if you look at what's going on in the industrial sector, in the manufacturing sector, there's a big trend towards something called Industry 4.0. So Industry 4.0, that's not Cisco's term, that's the manufacturing industry's term for the broad adoption of digitization in order to make things. So for the last 100 years, you've had programmable logic controllers connected to machines that have been making little widgets, and now those designs are being moved into the machines via the network. They take what's called the mix, and they send it over to the CNC machine or to whatever machine they're using to make their widget, and they take the electronic, the CAD drawings, the design of this widget, and move it across the network into the machine. That trend of connecting machines together is sweeping the world, and it's creating an increase in productivity, a decrease in cost, and it's making manufacturing more agile. At the same time, all of these connected machines are coming under attack from bad guys around the world. So you read in the newspaper, people are able to turn off the safety systems in a Saudi petrochemical plant a few years ago. The Colonial Pipeline in the southeast of the United States had its gasoline turned off. So there's a security aspect to this too. As people are designing Industry 4.0 networks, they're having to secure those networks. So adding wireless to this equation is not something that the large enterprises take really lightly. They really want to understand the security aspect of LoRaWAN, and they want to make sure that they're designing their wireless networks in a way that are fairly resilient under attack. When I talk to my customers are mostly federal customers who are part of what we call the defense industrial base, who are making things for the United States or NATO military customers, very expensive machinery, often very dangerous chemicals with a number of security requirements around that. Most of my customers are going through this checklist. So they're really worried about, first of all, safety, safety, and safety. Those are their top three things. They want to make sure that employee safety is top of mind. They want to make sure that they're complying to all the regulatory guidance that they have to. And mostly that's about cloud. They can't simply adopt cloud like most of the customers around LoRaWAN. And then beyond that, they're really worried about cost, driving down the cost of the widgets produced, and being able to innovate on the factory floor fairly quickly. So again, to recap, there's a lot of different wireless spectrum out there that large enterprises can adopt. LoRa is one component of that, and we try at Cisco to talk people through the different requirements for the different parts of the spectrum, the different technology, and what sensors or what other technology is around there. At the same time, all of my customers are digitizing their manufacturing and their logistics supply chain at the same time, and security is top of mind. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about one semi-anonymous customer that makes things for the United States military in the Midwest in the United States, in the middle of nowhere. If the entire place explodes, very few people are going to hear it. So it's really in the woods somewhere. It's a huge company, but this manufacturing facility was built at the beginning of World War II. So it was built in 1942 and has not received a lot of investment in the technology since it was built. So you can imagine really thick concrete walls, very old machinery, lots of paper and pencil and clipboards figuring out where things are and where they're going. So they have a big investment coming up in their manufacturing processes, and they're looking to make some intelligent decisions to jump forward into the next millennium, into this millennium. But right now, these are not pictures of my actual customers, of my actual customer in this case, but you can imagine it looks much like this. There are raw materials coming inside the front of the factory, and then there is finished product going out the back of the factory. So in that way, it's very much like every other manufacturing concern in the world. The big difference is they cannot consume cloud at all. So theoretically, they have a private cloud that they can use that was built. But in the federal government, much like in the US, much like most European governments, there is a term called data sovereignty, meaning that if we have somewhat sensitive data and you want to put it in the cloud, by law, you can't allow it to leave the country. And beyond that, the US federal government highly regulates how its own data, like if you're an American citizen, your taxes, your social security number, anything like that, where that can go in the cloud and how that can be handled. It's really very highly regulated. It's pretty expensive to comply, and that standard is called FedRAMP. So the US military and the defense industrial base is regulated a step beyond that. Let's just say for right now, you really can't use cloud. So our solution has been to use WMW, a Belgian application server, and ThingPark Enterprise from Actility. Hi, Alex. And these are two customer premise bits of software that are a LoRaWAN network server and a LoRaWAN application server, and load them up in Docker containers and move them into the customer premise data center. So that is our network server and our application server, and I'm going to walk through that. And then we use, obviously, Cisco routers and Cisco LoRaWAN gateways. I'll get to that in a minute, and the other regulations around that, along with ABIWay sensors and BLE anchors. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Here is also not a picture of my customer, but I found this on the internet. It gives you an idea of what the final solution, the final network design looks like. So in the top left corner, you see a Cisco 8-pound milled aluminum gateway. It's called our IXM. That was our first gateway product. And that's on the roof of the factory. And then inside of my factory, I've got our new gateway. Boy, I don't even know what the name is. That's how new it is. But it clips onto the top of a very small router called the 1101 router. And we've got it on the floor, the show floor, if you want to take a look at it. It's a lot less expensive, and it's really good indoors. So I've got those inside the factory. And then you see my tractor trailer trucks. So here's my problem. We're going to take chemicals for the military, the raw material, and we're going to bring it right up to the factory door. And each one of those trucks is going to have an Abiway sensor in it, and each one of the containers with the chemicals, that picture is not a real picture. You couldn't put chemicals in that container, but each one of those containers has an Abiway sensor on it. So you've got some spectrum going on here. You've got the outdoor gateway, receiving the truck signal, the datagram from the LoRaWAN sensor when it's outdoor, and then the sensor moves indoor. But there's a problem here, and that is when you move indoors, you're going to lose the GPS connection. So that's the other wireless technology that we all take for granted. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the GPS location of the truck and the material when it's outdoors, and when it's indoors, we've zoned off the inside of the factory via BLE anchors, and as it moves through the process, we'll have an approximate location of the chemicals as it moves into the factory, and then we'll be able to report that up to the application server. So let's talk for a minute about the problem that this solves. So we're in the middle of nowhere. It's a giant campus, this manufacturing facility, tens of thousands of acres, and you've got 18-year-old kids who are driving the trucks along. And the man who manages the factory told me that when birds, the blue heron, will land on the lakes next to the factory, the kids driving the trucks will say, oh, the fish are back. Driving along with a truck full of chemicals, they'll pull over to the side of the road, take their fishing pole from behind the seat, and walk off for 2, 3, 4 hours to go fish. Jump back in the truck, and then continue their route back to the factory. No one knows where they've been. So you can only imagine that the man managing the factory loses his mind when a truck full of chemicals goes completely missing from its origin to its destination for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. Well, that's the immediate problem. The long-term problem is they'd like to digitize the entire manufacturing process to really get at the heart of some safety and some logistics issues, be able to plan how much product is being delivered to their customers. But when you get into logistics and manufacturing, you'll often get these anecdotes. But when you really don't know where anything is, a lot of people take advantage of that and just go fishing for a couple of hours. So today we've used the Abiway sensors. They are going to be soon Class 1 Div 1 certified, is my understanding, Alex. So we've got them in a pilot there. We use the BLE anchors on the indoor, but then they pick up their GPS outdoors. They are in the inside the truck and attached to the outside of the containers. And so we can kind of get a chain of custody solution from our WMW application server, and both ThingPark Enterprise and WMW are loaded up on premise inside of this sensitive manufacturing concern. So we get full visibility of the entire supply chain, chemicals coming in, things going out, and we're able to geofence this so if anything goes missing, a truck makes a wrong turn or someone stops to go fishing for a little while, we can send some proactive alerts out to people. But then the next step is, well, we're putting up LoRaWAN sensors. Let's do door open, close. Let's do light monitoring. Tell us if a light bulb goes out. That might be a safety issue. So with very little money, we're really able to modernize the supply chain. The whole point of this story was to say, the people running this factory could never have come up with this. We really need to walk our customers through the business outcomes that they're looking for, the different kinds of technology, understanding where GPS may apply, where BLE may apply, where Wi-Fi 6 may apply. Large enterprises are investing in all of this, and I'm here to tell you they're really confused. LoRaWAN is exploding. Went to a lot of fantastic presentations over the last couple of days, but what I haven't heard is a lot about 5G and Wi-Fi 6 and demystifying for customers, explaining to them what fits where and how to bring this all together. And I think that's something that we can all kind of work on in the coming years. So the last thing I will mention is the gateways that we used in this product, and this just goes to the security discussion for a minute. So on the left is our outdoor gateway, which is IP67 rated, and so you would put that on the roof, and it has 3 different kind of lightning arresters you can buy in it. It's It's PoE powered, and we've been selling that for a number of years. And on the right is the new one, which you can go down the hall and see, and it's tiny and 8-channel, clips on the top of a router, and is relatively inexpensive. So the thing I'd like to point about the old one is about a year or so ago, we actually took this through a certification process with the US military, with the US government, called FIPS. And if I don't get this wrong, because I never say it out loud, it's Federal Information Protective System, I think is the acronym. And what they do is the government actually checks out the kind of crypto used in the device to make sure it doesn't have flaws or some weird proprietary cryptological algorithm. And so at Cisco, we use the same crypto algorithm for everything. So this is the same crypto stack that we use in our routers and Wi-Fi access points and things like that. And so we got a certificate from the US military that says, hey, this is cryptologically sound, this is secure. So it's kind of cool, I think, that the US military says, hey, look, LoRaWAN, at least this gateway and these sensors, it's secure. I think that's a big step forward and a good message that we can take out to the marketplace. And then this slide is wrong. It will sometime soon say the new module will be FIPS 140-2 compliant, but right now it isn't. So this is our new gateway, and you kind of see it here. It clips onto the router itself, and it's got 868 and 915 bands, and it works not only with the Actility network server and the Cisco solution industrial asset vision, but with everything else that's standards-based in the industry. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do is just do a very quick recap. And the first point is there are a lot of different technologies out there that are competing for attention in the market with large enterprise customers, from Wi-Fi 6, 5G, Curb from Cisco, LoRaWAN, and other things. And it's pretty confusing to be a customer right now trying to implement this if you run an enterprise network. But I'm seeing in my space, which is the federal space, a big drive towards the adoption, the digitization of manufacturing and logistics. They're under a lot of pressure to do that. They have to be secure when they do it because everything's under attack these days, but they're going to do it anyway. So we kind of talked a little bit about how we were using BLE indoors and GPS outdoors and geofencing and chain of custody in order to make sure that no one went fishing on the way to the factory. And there are more new certified products coming out from Cisco that are not only ATEX certified, but FIPS certified and all kinds of other certification. That's 868, 915, and works with everyone else's stuff. And so in about 22 minutes, that's my half-hour presentation. So are there any questions? Yes?
Can you tell us more about the WMW software?
I can. I'll give you kind of a short answer, and then I'm going to let the CEO of WMW give you a longer answer afterwards. He's sitting right there in the gray shirt. But we work a lot with, Cisco works a lot with Actility, who has a network server. And we were looking for a kind of customizable framework to create different applications for our different federal customers. So we were introduced to WMW at Mobile World Congress a few years ago. And since then, we've been using their cloud-based and customer prem application server to kind of very quickly create different applications. My problem is so I'm in, as I said, my customers are the U.S. federal government. So my customers are like the post office is one, and I don't know, the Department of Energy is another, and the FBI is a third. So when these people deploy IoT solutions, they have very different requirements. The post office is not interested in the same thing as the FBI, right? So what we needed was the flexibility to be able to create different applications using LoRaWAN, PLE, and a range of sensors. So Bert Van Aken here will tell you more about their product later, but they support hundreds of sensors and give you the ability to quickly create your own applications. It's a framework. Question, Alex? So I'll give you just a couple of examples. So we at Cisco actually have a whole internal division that tests the security of our products, the routers and the switches and everything before they go out the door. So I'm not, an expert in this, but just as an example, in routers, how the keys are distributed to make sure that the operating system that is running in the router is the same operating system that was installed at the factory or an upgrade from Cisco. So you don't want your customer to download a counterfeit operating system and load that on a device. So Cisco builds all of our networking products to these security standards, and our customers like, FBI or Interpol, they're really worried about the ability of someone to load counterfeit software onto devices. So we've put a lot of thought. There's a whole division in terms of just the veracity, the accuracy, the authenticity of all the software we make. And now that applies to all the LoRaWAN stuff that we make as well. And then I'll put a little plug in for something else, just because you asked, which is there is a big division now at Cisco in industrial security. And this wasn't a thing 10 years ago, but there's a lot of activity, there's a good 100-page white paper, 80-page white paper out there on building secure industrial networks, because these factories have become targets. They'll be blackmailed, hey, I'm not going to turn back on your logistics supply chain if you don't pay me $1 million in Bitcoin or whatever they use now. But building secure industrial networks is a major theme in Industry 4.0 these days. And I'm happy that I'm a big LoRaWAN proponent. I'm happy now that LoRaWAN is getting the same kind of visibility inside Cisco and outside of Cisco as being a secure protocol, because everything is encrypted by default, and it's using excellent keying mechanisms, and it's all been well tested. But this whole idea around industrial security and how to build secure wired and wireless industrial networks is a big deal in the manufacturing sector right now, because they're really feeling the pain. So it's very interesting.
Do you think the security of LoRaWAN is better than what we see, not only Wi-Fi 6, but current Wi-Fi standards?
Well, so the question was, is the security of LoRaWAN as secure as other protocols, essentially, as I understand it, or better? So I'll tell you, I've been in this job for 25 years at Cisco, and I'll give you the answer that my colleague Randy gives everyone when we talk about this, and that is, for the first time in my life, this is a protocol that's been introduced with encryption on by default. If you don't encrypt, you are not LoRa compliant. So I'm not so worried about kind of ideal case scenarios with building IP networks. Hackers aren't looking at the ideal, the perfectly built network. The vulnerabilities are misconfigured things where things were not, the encryption was not turned on, or the default passwords were not changed. That's where the vulnerabilities occur. So the hackers are always looking for the weakest link in the fence. I consider LoRaWAN to be the strong link in the fence, or at least by default, LoRaWAN with AES 128-bit encryption turned on everything, or you're not standards-based. That's a great story to go and take to the security officer at a major defense manufacturer, and I get a lot of mileage out of that story. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but at least it's on by default. It's on for everything, and it's a story that resonates in my customer base. Yep. Any other questions? We are, yeah. Hey,
So
Scott.
Class 1 Dev 1 transition for the tags, you said that's coming up soon, and how's that being tested?
So the question from Scott was Class 1 Div 1 tag is coming up now. Again, much like I introduced Bert, the go-between for all that work is Alex, who's sitting right here in the front row. It's in process. I think all the financing and paperwork for the testing, as I understand it, and Alex will correct me later afterwards, is there was a separate set of standards that it was already built to the European standards, and actually they just had to retest it according to the American ones, more or less. That cost money and paperwork had to be signed, and that's been done. So.
That's the AX1 by ECX1 Zone 1 certification, so they're pretty close to Class 1 Div 1 certification.
So it was basically a retest process rather than a product development one, so in order to comply. So thank you very much for presenting, and this has been a fantastic conference. Thanks for attending.